Hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of the Herbal Mana Podcast. At Herbal Mana, we get into all things natural, especially to help you hurt less and live more. And today is going to be a lot of fun. Today we've got Steve McKinney, and Steve's got a really awesome background in fitness, powerlifting, all kinds of fun stuff, plus being an author with a great following. This is going to be a lot of fun today, Steve. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Been looking
Todd,
forward to it.
I'm excited to be here. Excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
All right, let's dive in a little bit here. You're big into fitness. How did that all start? I know you've got quite a background.
Yeah, no, it was just one of those things that even as a young kid, I just enjoyed. I remember probably 7 or 8 years old, I watched a Mr. Universe contest, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are Hercules, and I want to be like them. And my grandfather bought me a set of weights from a place called Kmart, and they were the plastic weights, and they were called the Alcatron. And I came home and I put them in my basement and I used them every day. I made no gains whatsoever because I'm just a kid, but I loved it. And so I got bit by the iron bug. Fast forward from there, a lot of athletic stuff. And I just really always enjoyed the weights. And so I became a competitive bodybuilder. I did that for a while. I played, back in my day, slow pitch softball was huge actually across the country. And so I traveled the country, played slow pitch softball for a living. I did that for a long time. I'm still into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I still stay very active at 64 years old. And I use the system that I talk about in the book that we're going to talk a bit about today.
That's awesome. Good background. Slow pitch softball.
Yeah, that was big.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun in the day.
Well, I've seen some of those really good teams play the slow pitch softball, and it's just like a home run derby.
That's exactly what it was. It's exactly what it was. It was a lot of home runs.
It's cool. A lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's dive into the book. I can see it on your shelf behind you.
Yes, The Gospel of Fitness.
Yes.
Give you some background on how that came about. Okay, so what I had at my place, we had a local gym. Everybody went to the local gym. The local gym closed. And so I'm like, man, I'm just not going to chase gyms. I just turned my garage into a gym. Went to the city, got a business license in a residential area. I just had people come to me. I had like 50 people coming to my gym a month. You know, I had 50 members, and my neighbors were complaining. The parking was terrible. But what I noticed was everyone would ask me, hey, set me up a routine. Hey, set me up a diet. And I kind of looked at that and I said, and I would always help people because I was just into it. But I thought, I think this might go better as a personal training studio. So I just kind of moved from the monthly memberships to the one-to-one private personal training. And then what I did, Todd, was I measured everything that everyone did. I made sure that I kept detailed records of what people could do. And I wasn't just looking for what people could do for a short period. I was looking for what they could do for a lifetime. I wanted to set up a lifetime of fitness for people. So with that said, I just continued to refine the program, and I came up with this I call the 3W approach to fitness. If you hold up 3 fingers, it makes a W. It's weight training, walking, and watching your diet. That's the easiest way to remember it. When I go to speak at places, that is my little way to make sure it stays in people's memory. And so what I do with the weight training aspect, and this is hyper important, especially with the background that you have, I train muscles and save joints. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of programs out there that are what I consider very dangerous for people. You're lifting a lot of weight. You're basically throwing a lot of weight around, jumping on boxes, doing ropes, all these kind of things. And that works for a while, but as you age, those joints begin to fall apart. And here's the thing with the joints, they don't get better. They only get worse if you stay in that way. So what I do is I do something called, I make sure I load the muscle, and I measure time under tension, or time under load, it's called. And I train each person to momentary muscular failure. The repetitions are done very slow and controlled. There's a mind-muscle connection to it. For example, when you're lifting a weight, you could just lift the weight for 3 sets of 10 and say, hey, I did 3 sets of 10 with this much weight. That's not the goal. The goal is to deeply stimulate muscle using the weight as a tool. And if you do it correctly, that muscle will get stimulated and it will get stronger, provided it's given enough time to recover. And I'll even go deeper into that. So your muscles there are 4 different muscle fiber types when it comes to lifting weights that we're after. There's slow twitch. It's called slow oxidative. Then that's the first one. Then there's fast oxidative, which is the second one. The third one is called fast oxidative glycolytic. And the fourth one is the bundle that we're after. The muscle bundle we're after is called fast glycolytic. Now, Todd, to get to that fourth muscle bundle, you have to fatigue the first 3. In order to fatigue them, you have to keep them under tension the whole time, because your muscles, what they do is they fatigue in what's called a sequential order. So when I start with a slow controlled movement, that first muscle fiber type fatigues relatively quickly. The second muscle fiber types takes a little bit longer, and even into the third. So what I'm looking at is keeping tension on the muscle for 60 to 90 seconds. And right at the 60-second point, right in that area, those 3 muscle fiber types are fatigued. That's when you get into the fourth muscle fiber type. Now, getting there though, it's very, very uncomfortable. It creates a lot of burn in the muscle. And so when I'm looking at and I'm training a client or I'm explaining this to people, it's like, I want that burn. We're chasing the burn. We want the burn to happen, and we want to stay in the burn as long as we possibly can until you can't move the weight in proper form anymore. Now, what happens when you fatigue that fourth muscle fiber type, which is the thickest muscle fiber type, it takes anywhere from 2 seconds to 20 seconds to deeply fatigue that and to exhaust it. And here's what's interesting. It also takes anywhere from 4 to 10 days for that muscle fiber type to recover. And that's why I only have people work out 2 days a week, because it takes that long to recover properly. And this is going to sound really different, but my workouts are only 15 minutes. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I have this process that I've refined, and I've just made, all the nuances are really, really important in the middle of everything that we do with the actual set. Then what we do is we go from one set to the next with no rest. That elevates our heart rate for that full 15 minutes. But here's the other part that is so beneficial for your heart. It's not just keeping the heart rate high, it's teaching your heart how to beat more efficiently. And we do that by breathing properly. When I have my clients doing exercise, I never have them grunting or groaning. That's called Valsalva. And Valsalva is like putting a potato on the exhaust pipe of your car. And what it does, it backs everything up. By continually breathing, the heart is beating in an efficient manner, and it's getting better at what's called stroke volume. So that's how I approach the weight training aspect. And that's where that particular aspect of the 3W approach comes from. Now,
If I follow that breathing, I'm not going to set off the lunk alarm at
you
Planet Fitness.
you shouldn't. You shouldn't.
Be able to.
It should be more.
You're serious about that lunk alarm.
No, I know. I've been there. And I was totally intimidated by going into Planet Fitness, because I just went in I was on a trip, and I'm like, I need a place to work out, and I'm like, the lunk alarm, what is this thing? And I'm like looking it up. I'm like, oh,
How bad is it? What's going to happen to me?
Yeah, am I going to going to cut off a finger or something? I'm not really sure. So, but no, it doesn't. But the breathing aspect of it is super important as well. And here's what you'll find: if you breathe properly, your set will extend 1 or 2 extra reps. And once again, the goal is not how much weight that we use. The weight is actually a tool. And the tool is to fatigue the muscle deeply. And we do that with a moderately heavy load, but we also keep the muscle under tension, and we do it slow so that the joints stay healthy as we're doing. And that's one of the biggest things. I've been on a few book tours, and I do question and answer at the end. And there's so many people who have exercised wrong for a long period of time, and their joints are all out of whack in the middle of that.
Yeah. I wish I'd met you when I was a kid. We didn't get a lot of good instruction back in the day, back in high school, back when we were lifting. The coach said, lift heavy, we lifted heavy. Squat all the way down to this certain level, I'd squat to that level. And I'd push a lot of weight. I'd squat like 530 pounds beyond parallel.
That's awesome.
It's awesome, and it's a lot of fun,
But
I paid for it.
You paid for it.
Between that and what the doctors gave me just so I could keep playing ball.
Yeah.
I really paid. I
No,
did
I
not get great instruction, and I didn't get really good medical counseling. Back then, I just wanted to play. So the doc said, take this, you can play. And I took it, and it was awesome until I got a reaction to it, had to go off. Then I realized I was doing some serious damage. Ended up with a couple high school knee surgeries and then a whole bunch after that. Never should, at that age, have those kinds of injuries. Like,
No, I agree. I totally agree. And high school coaching is honestly, if the coach isn't educated, it's one of the worst things that could happen to an athlete. Because they'll just say, hey, just lift heavy. You got to get stronger. Everybody else is
certainly
going.
back in the day. I don't think there's an excuse now for not having some reasonably good knowledge because there are resources like your book, other great resources. And if a high school coach isn't doing a little digging, that high school coach is not doing his or her job.
Yeah, negligent for
A
sure.
lot of good information these days.
Yeah, it is. So, but that's the first W. The second W is walking. And I just suggested my clients to walk for 30 minutes a day, preferably after dinner. And there was a study done years ago. And what they did was they measured calories burned after activity and they measured walking. So they did 3 different measurements. They did calories burned after walking, after eating and walking, and after walking and eating. And what they concluded, what they found was calories burned after eating and walking was the best because it increased BMR by 25 to 30%. So what I tell my clients, a lot of clients come to me for weight loss. They want to look better, they want to feel better, they want to lose some body fat. So in order for them to do that, that's the third W is watching your diet. We have to create a calorie deficit. And we want to do that within moderation, but I never measure activity into the calorie deficit. Walking, it should be done at a very moderate pace, but you do it within 15 minutes after dinner and you do it for 30 minutes, preferably outside, looking around because it's good for your brain. So just look around and see the beauty of this earth in which we live and the things that we have. And just that fresh air, the sunshine works so well. Now, where I'm at, it has been cold. It's starting to warm up. So I have a treadmill, but I still do that every single day. I do that on a regular basis and they do it right after dinner. It aids in digestion. It's just really good for your body overall and for your brain.
So 30 minutes, moderate pace, don't have to count steps.
Nope.
Do I have to walk backwards? Do I have to
Nope.
walk sideways?
Nope. None of that.
Do I need to go on a steep incline?
None of it. Just walk. Because here's what's interesting. A lot of people think that, oh, if I exercise more, I'll lose more weight. But the truth is, weight loss is primarily controlled by caloric intake. It's controlled by how much you eat. You cannot out exercise a bad diet. And that's where a big problem comes in. People will overeat and they're like, oh, I'm going to go take a run. And one of the hardest things on your body, especially as you age, is that continual pounding of the pavement on your knees and your hips and ankles. I can't even tell you the number of clients that have been referred to me by local doctors and chiropractors for running injuries just over the years. They're just beating those joints down. I always tell them, hey, listen, you're not getting a benefit out of running. It's actually a detriment to your body. It's actually what I call a sarcopenic activity, which is it eats away muscle tissue more than it helps muscle tissue. And it causes structural problems in the middle of that. So for me, when I have clients that want to lose weight, I'm like, listen, we want to control your diet. We want to control your caloric intake. You want to make it a very moderate calorie deficit. And then you add the weight training, which will build a little bit of muscle, at least not let you lose strength as you age, which also kicks your basal metabolic rate up. And so you're burning more calories while doing nothing. And then you're slightly lowering your caloric intake. And you have to have a definitive goal that you want to reach with that.
Have that misconception they can overeat and then hit the treadmill or hit the bike and put in an extra 20 minutes. Can't burn enough calories to overcome a bad meal.
You cannot do
it.
it.
Really difficult to do.
Yeah, and especially as you get older.
Yeah.
The overexercise as you get older increases cortisol response, which is actually catabolic. It's muscle. It eats away at muscle rather than helps it. And so finding a moderate approach, they call the book Aging Gracefully.
I like that.
Yeah. So we want to take care of our body as we age to make sure those joints still feel good. And, all our blood, you want to measure, make sure your blood works good, make any adjustments accordingly, because food really is medicine if you go about it properly.
Food is medicine. That's interesting national dialogue going right now. We've got a medical industry that doesn't really care much about food,
Yes.
and a food industry that doesn't care much about health.
You're right.
Somehow we have to overcome all of the information that we're being fed or not fed by those two groups. It's pretty
No,
interesting.
you're absolutely right, because food companies are designed to addict us to the food that they're selling. So take a potato chip, for example. The old cliche for Lay's was no one can eat just one. And so that's true, though. When you start eating those, people eat a bag of them because they're laced with salt. They light up the pleasure centers of your brain, and they're designed to addict you to that particular product. I have so many clients that come through the door that, I'll tell them, I'll let them know, I'm like, you're addicted to drinking your soda every single day. And, then they're like, well, can I cut back? And I'm like, when you're stopping smoking, you don't cut back smoking, you stop, because that's an addiction. It's the same thing with those types of food. If you go to real food, you begin to see a total difference in the way you feel. Now, clients will also go through a depression process after getting off of those addicting, because that pleasure center it's not lit up anymore. And so they're fighting that particular thing. And so they use food to control emotions. And
See folks that are doing that first step back from the processed foods, and it's tough.
it's
It's
very
tough.
tough.
I did a diet years ago. I was having some pretty good success, but that diet required that I behave really well until Friday night. And then I got a cheat meal,
Uh-huh.
which became cheat day, became cheat weekend, because once I had my cheat, it was a little bit hard. It was hard to turn off that craving, and it became just a death match every weekend to get back on track.
Todd, I couldn't agree with you more. I've
That,
done it.
that took gut wrenching self control, and eventually I didn't have it. I've realized that was just too big a battle. I could not have a blowout cheat day.
Oh,
It just doesn't work.
I was a competitive bodybuilder, and one day a week you'd get to go off the diet, and it was super unhealthy, and it created almost an eating disorder, because I remember going to Krispy Kreme donuts and getting a dozen glazed and a dozen mixed, and the Krispy Kremes was maybe 2 minutes from the highway, and I got the donuts, and by the time I hit the highway, 6 of the mixed were gone.
Oh
I
yeah,
was just there. It
little
was,
puffs of air.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's a big part of,
Funny that you said you felt like you had an eating disorder. That's kind of how I felt, because it was such a battle.
yeah.
Too hard, too
And
much. It required too much self control because I didn't have a system. I didn't have an approach other than cheat day. And I always looked forward to cheat day, which just rocked my self control. That was hard.
I did the same stuff, totally the same thing, and it just didn't work. Now I just kind of, just eat normally through the week. If I need to enjoy something, I do, but for the most part, I eat really, really clean, and it's super helpful.
A
It's
lot easier.
Yeah, it is, and the joints feel better, the body feels better. There's way less inflammation, and so that, yeah. And then when I talk about the third W, which is watching your diet, protein's a big thing now, and you see that a lot more as people age, making sure they have enough protein. And my general recommendations are 70 to 90 grams of protein for women per day, and then 90 to 120 grams for men per day. That's a general guideline. And if people are bigger, they can eat a little more. Smaller, they can eat a little less. But you want to stay in that particular category, because you need those to keep your muscle, on board.
That can be a little challenging to get that much protein sometimes.
It's very challenging. And so what I have people do is I make sure that they monitor their protein intake, and then monitor how they feel after. So if they have trouble digesting it, you might need to change the protein source, or you might need to reduce the amount that you're eating. Average chicken breast is about 30 grams of protein. So if you eat one of those a day, you're right on the right track of just getting started with it. And so it's not a ton, but it's, just enough. And then if they want to add a protein shake, that's perfectly fine as well, just as a supplement. So that's kind of how I approach that whole thing. So
You mentioned before we got on that you used DMSO back in the day, kind of like we do with our products. What did you guys do with DMSO back in the day?
back in the day, we would get it from horse trainers, because it wasn't something that you could get over the counter. And if you had a joint problem, and oh my gosh, your breath would smell like garlic.
Uh-huh.
There were guys that would crush up aspirin and then put the DMSO over the aspirin, thinking it would absorb into the joints a little bit better. But yeah, that was a big staple in the powerlifting days. That was a big staple in the gym. It was just that cult mentality of, hey, you're using this, I'm using it, we're powerlifters, and we're going with it. But as I was telling you earlier, also, I used your product today, because it went from really warm yesterday to really cold today. And I'm like, man, my knee is a little stiff this morning. And I thought I was waiting for something to hurt because usually I feel pretty good. And so I've had that on my desk at work at the gym. And so I'm like, I'm going to try this. And so my left knee was bothering me. My thumbs were bothering me, just a little arthritic, in that. Put it on both thumbs, and on the knee. The knee was noticeably different. I mean, to the point where like, hey, that actually really, really worked. And then it calmed the thumbs down as well. So I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I love that. So it was a very objective test for me. I didn't want to, come in and say, oh yeah, it worked without, truly testing it in an objective manner. So yeah, and I'm gonna just continue to use it and just kind of see and go from there. Yeah, but it's very helpful, very helpful.
Just nice if we can get it in therapeutic, pharmaceutical grade these days rather than just from the horse trainers. In fact, we can get it in sufficient purity that the FDA will use it for some internal uses.
How do
It's
they
kind
do
of
that?
funny.
What is that? What do they do? What internal use are they?
Well, one they use it for is interstitial cystitis, which is a bladder condition. And
Interesting.
they'll actually eject it into the bladder, bathe the inside of the bladder to overcome inflammation and some other chronic problems. That's a really tough malady to work through. It's also used every day for organ transplants and stem cell transplants because they need something that will preserve the tissue. If you put let's say a heart, you need to transplant, and you just put it in water and you get it cold enough to preserve the tissue, the water will crystallize and that will start to damage the tissue. Water mixed with DMSO has a much lower freezing point. In fact, it's kind of interesting. Water has a freezing point of 32 degrees Fahrenheit, has a freezing point of about 64 degrees Fahrenheit, much higher. But if you put them together, the freezing point is closer to zero when you mix them together, the way the chemistry works. So you can keep that tissue much colder without actual freezing, without the crystallization, without the tissue damage.
Brilliant.
Pretty magical. It's used all day, every day. In fact, you can go to PubMed. PubMed has the peer-reviewed journals that I like to read. And in there, you can find tens of thousands of articles, many of them just talking about DMSO being used as a transfer agent because it moves everything into the skin, into the tissue, but also for the interstitial cystitis, organ transplantation, stem cell transplants, all kinds of good things. Just
Love it.
pretty interesting occurring substance. Just comes from trees.
Yeah,
Pretty
and it
awesome.
works. It
Yeah,
works.
and it works. That's the bottom line. Works.
That's the bottom line. So
Safe, healthy, it
yeah,
works. And the pharmaceutical folks cannot own it because it's naturally occurring.
perfect. Yeah, and so you don't have that big pharma in the middle of it all. And
You
so
don't have big pharma and you don't have the drug side effects. Like I've had taking over-the-counter drugs, prescribed drugs, other things where you get some nasty little outcomes that you really didn't want as part of the process. And we just don't see that with DMSO.
yeah, love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so then I also talk about, I've got a bunch of different things I talk about in the book, but one of the things that we're looking at, one of the things I talk about 5 things we fight. The first thing we fight is the aging process. And we don't want to accelerate that. We want to just kind of calm it down if that's possible. And so that's a big fight that we have. And everybody ages. There's just no way around it. We can't reverse that. But what we can do if we take care of ourselves properly, if we lift weights to continue to make sure that our musculature stays strong, it also sends these signals to other parts of your body called myokines that tells your organs that when you lift weights, these signals are sent. And then what they're saying is, hey, we're doing something good for the muscles and we want to include you in it. So it sends these signals to the organs that just helps with overall health. So we're fighting that aging process. The next thing we're fighting is what's called sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss. And it's going to happen to each and every one of us. But what we want to do is we want to slow that process down. And that's why I don't do a lot of long cardiovascular activities, only because that really digs more into your muscles. So you want to be very, very aware of how much you're doing. And I just kind of top it up. Now, some people like to walk longer, and I don't want to say, hey, you can't do that. It's not a law. I'm just putting some guidelines out there, but just keeping yourself from increasing the cortisol level with extremely long aerobic activity, that's also what eats away. It adds to the muscle loss. And so those are, some really interesting things that we're trying to fight against. And then there's other parts of that. I talk about hopelessness. As people get older, they lose purpose in life. You have friends who've retired and they're just lost because their job was their identity. And so you have to have a purpose that you're living for. If you look at the title of my book, it's called The Gospel of Fitness. And people ask me, well, is it gospel or is it fitness? And my answer is always yes. Yes. It's very subversive. But you just have to have a purpose in life. And one of my purposes in life is to help people age gracefully, to allow them to learn there are ways that you can age in a proper way. And I think one of the other things we find is the use of technology for our health and wellness. Now, there's nothing wrong with technology at all. But I've had clients walk in with the Fitbit and they're looking at calories burned and their heart rate. I had one person come into me and they said, I'm not losing weight. And so it's like blaming me for not losing weight. Well, I said, well, tell me what you're doing. And they go, well, I'm eating 2,200, or how much you're eating. I'm eating 2,200 calories per day. I said, well, I can tell you exactly what the problem is. You're eating too much food. And they said, but my Fitbit, it says that I can eat this much. They're just adamantly pointing at that. And I said, well, listen, your Fitbit's wrong. Bottom line, because the scale is going to tell the truth and your clothes are what are going to tell the truth. And so what the Fitbit does, it adds your activity into your calorie range, which is not what you want to do. And so what it does, it gives you more calories than you should be eating. Now, once again, if people like that much feedback, that's perfectly fine, but just make sure you're doing it correctly. For me, too much feedback. I need to keep it simple. So if I'm needing to lose weight, I simply look at the scale and I measure my caloric intake as a whole. Make sure I'm eating healthy, make sure I'm eating properly. And those things really do make a difference. And so I don't rely on technology. I rely on my belt. How does my belt feel? How do my pants feel? How do I look in the mirror? What does the scale say? Just very simple ways to approach that.
I like that. A lot simpler than the fancy watches. In fact, I got one of those watches.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly I found I only really wanted to use it for two things after I got it. At first I thought all the gadgetry would be great. And then I realized after a couple of weeks of playing with the gadgetry that I really just cared about knowing what time it is and having it vibrate when I had an upcoming call or an appointment.
Perfect.
Because tracking all the information became a task unto itself, and it wasn't really helping. It actually made me just more anxious. Am I getting enough steps? Am I doing the stuff? Do I have my calories? Anyway, too much. And I kind of reverted back to scale and does my belt still fit? So something simple.
It's so simple. And that's what you have to do. You have to make things simple. You'll get people who are training an hour a day, 5 days a week, and they're going to the gym doing that. I'm like, man, oh man, that is a part-time job. I suggest in my book, I start people off 3 days a week, 15 minutes at a time for the first 2 weeks. The reason I do that is I want them to learn the exercises and I want them to learn the routines. After that, we go to 2 days a week. I have clients now who are older that can only do 1 day a week, but still maintain their strength in the middle of that. And that, for some people, when they hear that, says, there's no way one 15-minute workout per week will work. Well, I have evidence and have for over 30 years that it does work. Now, 2 days a week seems to be optimal for most people. But once again, it's very, very simple. It's not a part-time job. You're in, you're out, you get the same results, if not better, and you save the wear and tear on your body in the middle of that. And so efficiency is incredibly important.
Funny, I go to my little local gym. It's just a few hundred yards from here. And no matter what time of day I go, normally I like to go first thing in the morning, but occasionally I don't get there till later. I see some of the same folks. I have no idea how long they're parked at the gym. But if I go in the morning, they're there. If I go in the afternoon, they're also there. And it looks like you said, part-time job. That's a little daunting for most of us.
It is.
It's too much for most of us.
No, I agree. And it's so for some people, it's a social thing. They have nothing to do, which is perfectly fine. But for me, I have things to do. I want to optimize my life. There's so many things that I'm still involved in, and I want to, just do the best I can and do it the most efficient way that I can. And I have so many CEOs and people who run businesses who love that I can just get them a short workout in. We do a lot of online training that I can get them a short workout in. They get the results they're after. They're feeling better, and it reduces that CEO stress, I call it, and it just makes them feel better. And so, it's done very, very quickly. They can move on and get their day under control in the middle of that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, I saw the book on Amazon. How long has the book been out? I saw it as a paperback.
Yeah, it's been out since January 31st.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw the real deal.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fresh.
Yeah, it's very, very new. I've done 3 different states, Illinois, Missouri, and Florida with the book tour. I'm still doing a lot of podcasts. I just did one earlier today. This is my second one of the day, it's really been received well. One of my clients came in early this morning and she goes, "Hey, I was in St. Louis and I was talking to my best friend's mother's best friend. And she was telling me about this book she was reading that happened to be your book." And she said, yeah, so that just puts a smile on my face. I have, there's a bookstore in a church in St. Louis and I sent some over. They said they sold out over the weekend. So it's really, really been going well, better than I even imagined. And so I'm just going to ride the wave and see how far we go with it. And I do a lot of public speaking as well with it, local Rotary clubs, businesses, churches, and things like that. And it's really, that's the most fun for me because I love to do question and answer at the end and just help people in the middle of it. So it's an absolute blast.
I like it. And the message certainly fits our crowd. We have some that may not be thinking about aging. They may not be 60 like me or 64 like you, but they might be 35 or 40, but dealing with some of those nagging injuries, those sore hips, sore ankles and knees from the wrong kind of training or overtraining, or some of us are just not put together as well.
Yes.
And we need to be cognizant of the fact we've got to preserve those joints. Those tissues don't heal very quickly. In fact, some don't come back at all if you damage them badly enough. Now, I've gone through knee replacements, full replacements, because mine didn't weather so well. And I had all bad genes, bad habits, bad luck. I think somebody that's 35 and already feeling some of these effects would do well to look at what you're doing. So they've got those joints working when they get to the retirement age. So they still can be active.
Todd, you're
Golfing, bowling, whatever it happens to be, rather than laid up because they overdid it or did it the wrong way.
You're absolutely right. And that your number is absolutely correct. At the age of 35 is when the decline begins to really happen. The decline starts at that age and then moves on from there. I have a first grandson, which I just am just such a joy. And I can still, and we call it crazy horse, where I get on all fours and he gets on my back. And so, but I can still do that. My son and I run a jiu-jitsu school together. I still train jiu-jitsu once or twice a week. Yeah. And so I love doing that kind of stuff. That stuff makes me happy. It's fun. That's the goal because I do practice what I preach in the book. This is the system that I use, and I've used it for years, and I find it to be the best system for saving your joints and remaining strong. And it allows me to do the other things that I want to do. I have a guy, I tell this about this guy all the time. He was actually in my gym this morning. His name's Steve. He's a local pharmacist. And over 30 years ago, he came to me in my gym. I think he weighed 264 pounds because I do before and after pictures. And I think that's what it was. But anyway, I said, "Steve, what's your goal?" He goes, "Well, I want to lose weight." And his father died at 40 years old, very young. And he goes, "And I want to be able to play with my grandkids. And if I ever had them," this was years ago. Today he's in the gym. He only trains once a week, weighs 175 pounds. He has 2 grandchildren that he gets to play with, and he still follows the same system. He counts his calories. He walks daily. He comes to the gym once a week. So the proof's in the pudding there. And it really does work. Yeah.
Like the thought of being able to get to that age and still be able to play, still be active.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to be like my dad. Dad was just out Thursday, walked 18 holes of golf.
Yes.
He's 84.
That's awesome.
84. That's what I want to be. I want to be that.
Yeah. Yeah. Both my parents died at 49, terrible lifestyles. And so, yeah. So for me, that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this, because, you lose parents at that age and they had so much to enjoy and they missed it. Bad luck, bad genes, bad habits, all those things figure in. And so, I just want to be able to.
With the bad luck and bad genes, a lot can be done to manage.
Yeah.
A lot can be done.
Yeah. And you just
get serious.
Yeah. And you just learn how your body works. And I think that's really, really important. And then you monitor everything that you do. One of the things I talk about in the gym, if you can measure it, then you can control it. And so once you measure things and you see how you're feeling, you get some feedback, you can make some adjustments to make a difference. If you're hurting yourself doing something particularly, then you simply stop doing that, And I always tell my clients to treat their gym visits, their gym appointments, as doctor appointments, because if you do, you'll have less doctor appointments. So, and I have a great doctor. I went to visit him a couple of weeks ago just for my yearly, and I brought him a book, signed the book for him. I had an extra copy, and he was so excited because he's a lifter, but he had torn the retina in his eye and he hadn't lifted for a year. And I was explaining to him that there are ways that you can lift if it's healed enough and you're good to go. there are ways that you can lift and breathe to make sure that that pressure doesn't build up in your eye. If you're breathing properly, like I explained earlier, and it'll make a huge difference. Anyway, I was in the office. He was talking to me for 45 minutes. I put him behind for the whole day. And as I was leaving,
45 minutes.
he's a great doctor. He's just one of my
awesome.
favorite people. And as I was leaving, he looked at me and goes, "Hey, I should pay you for today's visit." Because he just asked me question after question with the book, and he was so excited. Yeah, exactly. I go, "Hey, you can Venmo me. It's perfectly fine." So, but yeah, he's a really good doc. But it's helpful for people, and it's just really does make a difference in the long run.
All right. Well, I love it.
Awesome.
So the book is on Amazon.
Yes.
Is there going to be an audio version at some point?
I don't know at this point. It's just so new to me. It's my first book. It was kind of interesting how it came about. I was at a pastor's conference a few years ago. I run a church. I was at a pastor's conference. I went by myself and just wanted to hear this speaker. And there was a guy that I knew, and I trained him. And I took him through one of my workouts, and he's like, "Man, that's the best workout that I've ever been through in my life." So we became friends, and he has a big men's ministry. And so we would just collaborate over the years. And, 6, 8 months ago, he was asking me a few questions because I have a private Facebook group where my group can ask me questions. And his name's Pete. And I said, "Pete, I write stuff all the time. I'm always giving things out." And I was kind of putting this book together just to kind of give to my clients and no intention of selling it. And I said, "Pete, you know what? I got a book that's probably 90% done." I said, "How about I just send it over to you?" He goes, "Well, let me tell you something. I have a new publishing company." And he goes, "I'd love to read the book. Send it over." Then he reads it and sends it and responds. He goes, "Hey, we want to work with you on this." So that's kind of where this whole thing came
Small
from.
world connection. I love that.
Super great connection. And they set up the Florida tour for me, had an absolute blast doing it, spoke to, several hundred people at 2 different locations and answered questions and just had fun with it. Used it as a little mini vacation with my wife. And we just had a really, really good time. Yeah.
I really like that you're able to get such a big impact. Besides the personal training, one-on-one, groups maybe, that's helpful. But once you get that knowledge into a book, that's kind of magical. Then you can really impact a lot of people. So I think it's powerful. I think it's great. And based on what I see on Amazon, it is well received.
It is. It's hit number 1 in a couple of categories on more than one occasion. So the algorithm will take you up and down, but I've been at number 1 in fitness and aging, number 1 in quick workouts, really climbed a ladder in overall books at one point. And I jumped into, there are 2 million books on Amazon, and we jumped into the top 2,000, which I thought was great. Yeah. So it's been fun. It's been an absolute blast. I'm just going to ride the wave,
All right.
Yeah, I'm going to approach it.
Well, I love it. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Folks, if you guys are watching this, you really ought to go get that book. It has been well received. The reviews are awesome. And the subject matter, spot on. And like Steve was saying, it's 35. You ought to be looking. You ought to be thinking. Because that's the time when you start to feel that hit you had on that kickoff in high school. Yeah, you start feeling that by the time you're 35.
You betcha.
And it's time to start really thinking seriously about maintaining that health. Keep the joints going. Keep the muscles going. And you'll have an improved quality of life if you just get on a process like this.
Absolutely. And Todd, if people need to reach out to me, I'm at steve@fitnessandmore.net. They can find me on Facebook, Steve McKinney. And my website is fitnessandmore.net. And they can just fill out an introductory workout if they want to just kind of chat online or anything like that. I'm more than happy to help people in any way that I can.
Beautiful. We'll include some of that in the show notes. And then again, guys, on Amazon, it's out there. Okay. Well, we appreciate the time. And folks, if you love this, click to like it, subscribe, come back for more, and track down that book. This is awesome.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Great talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Steve.